right. So good morning, everybody, to another Q for Teams, Champions Using Teams Effectively. I'm your host, Ricardo Wilkins, and we're going to get started here after I check one thing. There's always something. Okay, that's good. All right, cool. Good there. So yeah, we'll get started. So I wasn't here last week. Stacy held it down, and I checked out the recording, which I'll be posting soon. I haven't done that yet either. I checked out the recording, and I noticed you guys talked a bit about tags in Teams, and so before I kind of open it up for the questions, I did want to just circle back on that because that's a tags and mentions in general are to me an interesting topic in terms of best practices, and so I wanted to say a couple things, show a couple things with that, and potentially hear your thoughts on best practices for tags and mentions as well. Let me share my window here. And so I think you can see that. And so just as a quick recap, and I don't think I have any tags in this one, but what they talked about was if I manage team and I go to tags, this one doesn't have any, and I am not the owner of this one. So let's go to a different one. Manage tags. I can create a tag and I can say that for this name, like project managers, I can put certain people in it. I think I've chosen one that only has me in it, but imagine that I could put multiple people in there. Now, there's a couple things interesting about this. One, obviously, anytime you are you constantly are reaching out to several of the same people, I think a tag is useful. I think it's also useful in a team with a lot of people where it's not so much about your convenience, but it's about people seeing the tag and understanding who those people are. Depending on the size of the team, there may be folks in there I don't realize are project managers. And so if I'm calling them out by their name, obviously I can know who they are, but to know that they are the project managers would be useful. And so I brought that up just even in this case of me putting a tag and putting only one person in it could have some value because now instead of tagging Ricardo, I could tag project project XYZ PM. That was a lot of letters there, but now I'm tagging Ricardo as the project manager for project XYZ, right? And so again, that's a very visual way for people to see who that is. And then of course that if other project managers get added to that project, they can be put in that tag and all that good stuff. But so I can see value even for one person on a tag just to have a label of their role relative to that team. That might be a lot of work if there's a lot of people with a lot of different roles, but can be pretty useful when I come in here and make a comment and isn't it showing? That's a whole nother. Oh, am I on the right team? That's a whole nother question here. Why isn't it showing the tag I just created? But just to have that tag and then proceed to say whatever it is I'm going to say is a nice visual. As I was thinking about this tags concept, I was also thinking about best practices for tags and mentions. And one that I use often, and I thought about it because I've been using it recently as well, is, and I'm curious you guys' opinion. Many people will, I need to get out of this team because there's only one person in it, but many people will, and in this case, I want to talk to Jordan, so I'll mention Jordan and then say what I want to say, what's the status, all right? I am of the opinion of doing it instead with what's the status at Jordan, okay? And the reason I do that is because when Jordan gets this message in their activity feed, depending on what I'm saying, I know that our activity feeds are going to get cut off like this one. I want the most information possible in this cutoff statement that I can give to Jordan to know that they should go check this out and read it. So putting Jordan in as that's taking up 6 characters with the space that I could be using for more relevant info, which a lot of times for me is, regarding, project A and then blah, 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 and then at Jordan is how I do it. So it's still going to give me the same result, which is an at mention, message to Jordan, but there's in my mind, there's no reason for the Jordan to be in the front other than the fact that that's just kind of how we talk naturally. But I'd rather put it on the back end so it doesn't take up this very limited space here. So that's another tip as well. But of course, also just the tip being to use those at mentions as much as possible. I always assume that the people I'm talking to are super busy, that their activity feeds are full of stuff. So how can I make mine stand out? How can I always assume that people maybe don't have their notifications on. Not always assume, but I often assume people don't have their notifications on. So even though that it may be a team and a channel that's, super busy, I put an at mention on at some points, just thinking, they may not get this unless I do. Same with channel mentions or even full team mentions. I mean, that I use those sparingly because that's a kind of a big blast. But yes, the at mentions to me is a key component of good teams etiquette, and one of the best ways to make sure that your team is seeing the stuff that you are posting, and that you don't run into that scenario where, hey, I'm posting all the time, but nobody ever responds, nobody ever sees it. Could be they don't have notifications on, and without those mentions, they're not getting pushed out the way you would hope. So yeah, that the tags concept I think plays into all of that, and gives an additional flavor to it. But I'm curious if anybody else's experience with tags and mentions, have they worked out for you? Have they backfired for you? I know I've been in some teams where the team actually asked the owner to turn off channel mentions, for instance, because they're getting overused by team members and things like that. So curious if anybody's got a passionate feeling about tags and or mentioning in teams, or any other best practices there. But I thought that was an interesting topic from last week. Any thoughts there? Hopefully everybody's using at mentions, or maybe your content's just getting seen without them.
I also use at mentions in my conversations. Excuse me, this is Melody. All of a sudden my voice decided not to work.
Right.
In conversations in channels. So if I post something in, say, our communication hub, and I want to make sure that people in the department go in and read it because it's an announcement, then I'll at mention the team, so that everybody gets an alert. Otherwise, if you just post stuff in there, they may or may not pay that much attention to it. But I think it works better if you want people to go in and see, oh, what's that alert? Because they'll click on their activity bell, hopefully, right? And then see that, and then they'll go and check it out. I find that more often when I do at mention the team, it does bring more people to the item that I want them to read.
Yep. Yeah. And Tim, I see you guys recommend for your large 6,000 person team, you turn off the channel and team mentions for those big teams. I'm on the fence on that kind of thing. I mean, again, if a team is using it often, or maybe too much, but I always then fall back to the fact that people can manage their own channels, and so maybe to your point, you're recommending turning it off because know that people aren't managing their own channel notifications, maybe. But yeah, certainly they could do some channel notification settings to adjust for that.
Yeah, the one thing, Ricardo, I think some of this is a learning process. We certainly found out in the beginning, number one, some people weren't aware of at mentions at all, and they would at mention people every time they posted something, right? So we had to back people off of that. But I think as the organization gets more mature, I think you're right. You can turn it on. But we have had people still coming in being very confused on notifications, and it's like I'm getting this notification from this channel. I don't know why, and that can get a little complicated too. So
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. Last thing I'll say there is, yes, the should I at mention on a one-to-one chat is an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's got a passionate answer there, because I'm talking to an individual. It's gonna make our conversation thread go bold over in Teams, over here in the chat area. But if I put an at mention on it, it's going to give an additional, you were mentioned, or whatever the messaging says. And again, I go back and forth on that, because I make that assumption that folks maybe aren't paying attention to their chat. And so I'm trying to give that extra notification push. But certainly if I'm talking to someone that I know that is a diligent, let's call it a diligent Teams user, I don't use as many at mentions in the one-to-one chat, but I am prone to put an at mention even in a one-to-one chat conversation like with Nestor here, just to make sure they see it, especially if it's super important. If it's me just kind of saying something kind of off the cuff, then I won't do that. So, but I try to be sensitive to not over mentioning. So.
It's funny you say that, Ricardo, because this is Heather. There's one person that we have from our sister organization or sister team that at mentions me every single time he starts a chat. And he does it, and I just kind of like, that's his way, whatever. But he does it to my boss as well, and it just absolutely drives her bananas. So, I think it can be overused, because it's like, okay, if I'm not paying attention to your chat right this second, maybe it's because I'm recording a video and I turned off all my notifications, and now you just put your notification in my video.
Right.
So yeah, there are some people that I actually think that one can be overused a little bit.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say about it, when we got the read indicator, when was that? Almost a year ago now. So, if you send something to somebody and you see that they haven't read it, then maybe you want to, send another one with that mention. But in most cases, you can see whether they've read it. So, if they've seen it, right?
Unless they've irritatingly turned it off.
Yeah, that's another one I'm guilty of. I will start up a chat, let's say with Nestor here. What's up? And I'll sit there and it's been 10 minutes and the little notification doesn't look like it's been read. For those that aren't aware of what we're talking about here, I thought I had my Zoom thing on, but the little notification here says sent, but we want it to say seen. If it's been a few minutes, I will go and edit the post and then add that on the back end as my second attempt to kind of get that. I am guilty of that one sometimes. Again, only if it's important, not for just a what's up, but if it's something I really need him to see, I am guilty of that one. So to the point of the person you just mentioned, at mentioning your manager, I'm not sure where I land on their approach. I don't know if I might use it myself, but hopefully someone for whom that's annoying. I guess it might be tough to bring that up and say, hey, can you not mention me? I don't know.
She's bold and she speaks her mind. Everybody knows it. So she just says, please don't do that. I will get to you when I get to you. I see your message. So yeah, I mean, we're a team of people where we treat everybody like grown adults and just say what we need to say in a polite tone of voice and just move on with it.
There you go. That's it. Nice. And then Kim says, people have mentioned the entire team with the same message in 10 plus different teams. So you get 10 notifications from the same person for the same message. Yep. Yep, I could see that too. That yeah, I don't know how you get around that one because you're trying to do a post and I'm assuming this person is doing a post, but then posting in multiple channels. So they're choosing a bunch of different channels to post it in, and then probably also at mentioning a particular person in that post. So that person, I guess, is going to get 3 notifications if they're in those 3 teams. And yeah, that's a tough one because yeah, I could see the need for this, but I could also see how getting all those notifications could be a problem too. So interesting. I appreciate the feedback there. That those are one of those small little etiquette in teams is now that's our thing, right? I mean, if this is how we're communicating on a regular basis, we want to all have good etiquette about it and be able to do it in a way that we can collaborate effectively. So it's good stuff. Well, I'll stop talking and let you guys, if anybody's got any burning questions or anything like that, let you guys bring up anything either in chat or off mute. I see your hand up, Glenn.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
We had an interesting problem that other people might be interested in. Teams is the front end, SharePoint is the back end for storage for files, and the point of SharePoint, everybody can share and edit. And in Office 365, multiple people can edit at the same time, and that's all wonderful. So one of our users said, hey, I'm putting files in there, and when people open them, they're read-only and nobody can edit them. And what we found was when we dug into it, she was sharing files in chat, not in a meeting, and they were in OneDrive, not SharePoint. And so they were all read only, and she had to go back into the file in her OneDrive and manually give permissions to edit. So we told her, we said, instead of going through all of this, since it's an ongoing chat, not a one-time thing, why don't you just create a team and make a meeting and share your files in the meeting, and then you won't have to manually give edit permission on each file. So if you have any further information on that, that's kind of something new that we discovered.
Yeah.
And if you share a file in a meeting, it goes into SharePoint. But if you share a file in a chat, it's coming from your individual OneDrive and it's read only unless you manually give permission to edit.
Absolutely. So yes, I always use the phrase OneDrive is my files, SharePoint is our files, right? And so and in a team, from a team's perspective, you're right, that is how that is done. Chat is OneDrive, and everything else in Teams essentially, or all the Teams files are using SharePoint. Now, whether or not they default to read only may depend. So for instance, I'm sharing a document here with Nestor, and I share what mine is defaulted to, if you can see there, is people in your organization with the link can edit. So I wonder, I guess it depends on what maybe your back end settings are, but this is the experience I usually see, is that at least for internal chats, those documents get shared with edit capabilities. But no matter what the setting is, hopefully you're also just seeing this ability right within the document, right within the chat to, let me do that one more time, to make a change at the point of sharing. Because you can see here, this is a drop down. If I didn't like the fact that people in your org with the link can edit, I have the option to do whatever I want to do here before I share it. So it's defaulting here to people currently in the chat. But I could make it whatever else I wanted to. I could allow or not allow editing, all those kind of things, and apply that before I do the share. And then, of course, as you mentioned, whatever, and then say I did that wrong, then I can, because it's all OneDrive and SharePoint, I can go back and make edits after the fact. What I was thinking about in your scenario is if that person was trying to reshare or change the permissions on a bunch of files for people who are all in a specific team, dropping dropping a copy of that file into the teams area should default it to, readable and editable for that team. I don't know if that's the intent, or because that would be a second copy, or if that person still wanted to manage the one copy in their OneDrive. Because if they're doing a lot of sharing of something from their OneDrive, I would start to then ask the question, so is that your file or is that our file? Because if it's our file, us, the team, to manage and own and collaborate on, then maybe it should live in our SharePoint area in the Teams files versus living in your OneDrive. Would be the question I would ask. But yes, that is, it's not necessarily obvious, that whole OneDrive for chat and SharePoint for Teams files, but that is certainly the case, and it's an important distinction to make and to understand there. I will say that, at least in my experience, I mean, that tends to work out well. From a default setting perspective, the fact that your files in Teams are by default, when I put something here in this folder, it's by default viewable and editable by the rest of the team, usually works out, because why am I putting this file here in the first place? Not just for me to use it on my own, otherwise I'd use OneDrive for that. I'm putting it here for team collaboration, most likely. So I like that default. And then the same with OneDrive. I like the fact of the OneDrive, I mean, private chat using OneDrive. And just remember also that for that chat here with Nestor, the Files tab would represent the files that he and I have been sharing with each other. They look like they're files sitting in some magic area for this one-to-one chat, but there are OneDrive files that private chat has conveniently aggregated here for us, so that we can, have access to them. So, but yes, absolutely a important distinction. So hopefully that helped. But and I know you'll bring it up for the rest of the audience. I don't know if anybody else has had good or bad experience with that concept, but that's a good one.
So Ricardo, can I throw out something from the bad experience side? And I, like you, when this first got raised, I was thinking about, somebody keeping everything on their OneDrive when it should be on the team. If that person leaves the organization, those files are gone. And if you have a team or an office that has become dependent on those files, they're tough to get back. I mean, I think they're only there for 30 days and you might not realize it. And then, of course, you have to get permission to get into somebody's personal OneDrive, which, there are concerns about that. It's something we pay a lot of close attention to, and your statement is the one we use. OneDrive should be for your personal stuff. Anything else should be somewhere on SharePoint, be it on a regular SharePoint site or a team site.
Yeah, and a couple of things I'll say there. I've seen a lot of customers have that challenge of important stuff in someone's OneDrive file and then they're gone. It's certainly not impossible. I'd call it very inconvenient to get those back, right? But the admins can do some magic, especially depending on how long it's been, right? There is a window. Right. They can certainly do some things to get that back. But yeah, certainly inconvenient. And and so to me, it's just great if you can remember that, hey, this document I'm about to start up, if I know that this is about to be collaborated on with others, I might as well start it in a team area. But I wouldn't be afraid, at least I'm not afraid of starting something in OneDrive, just because I know that either I can change permissions if needed, or that the chat that I might share it in, can change the permissions. And then of course I can just move it after the fact. But that certainly doesn't preclude the fact that, if I go win the lottery or something, I'm probably out on my last day gonna be thinking about making sure all those file permissions are set properly. So
The one other thing too, that what you said, we have it's kind of a behavior change, but we at times have said to people, start the file, like you said, in Teams. So go to the Files tab in Teams, New, because the first thing it does right there is ask you for the name of the document, and then it stores it automatically in the team.
Right.
Because the problem we have, people are used to going to the Word app, that automatically stores it in OneDrive. So, and then they have to be reminded to move it, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Right. Yep. I am even of the opinion I will start a doc that is not yet finished. I mean, I'll start drafts here. A lot of people want to start their drafts, and when it's in some kind of usable state, then move it over into the team's area. I'm happy to have you look at my mess, even in the beginning, because I, never know if you might provide some insights or help or anything. So I know some people have some hesitation with uh, starting a brand new doc there and people seeing all of their, edits before they're ready. But, just a different mindset, I guess. I see a hand there.
Yeah, it's Heather again.
Yep.
Just to share something that extends upon the scenario that we've been talking about, what we also discovered in our organization is when you create a form in Forms, it defaults to a personal form unless you specifically add it to a group, which is also tied to your OneDrive, so that when people leave your organization, if that form has become part of a critical business process, it leaves with that person and with that OneDrive. And we recently encountered a scenario where that was a big deal. They were relying on this data heavily, and then it was gone. So, just to share with the group, that might be something you want to emphasize as well, is that personal forms are tied to your OneDrive. Group forms are tied to the group or the team, and so they can survive the tenure of an employee.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of had to do that whole scope recently in a class that we created of where are the my files versus the our files. And it's not just Word, PowerPoint, Excel. It extends into forms and other things as well.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're saying someone creates a form, do you mean over in the browser and the
in
forms?
The forms application from the
Gotcha.
waffle icon.
Yeah.
The pretty green button at the top of the screen is actually a personal form, and a lot of people don't realize, who aren't paying attention or don't use it a lot. They don't realize to drill down into the group forms section and create the form there. So they'll just hit the pretty green button at the top of the screen, which is tied to your OneDrive.
Right. And so then they can avoid that if they know if it's meant to be a group form by creating it from Teams, right?
Or they can, even on that page, if they're comfortable with the waffle icon, I'm good with that as well. You just have to scroll down a little bit and select the group that you want it to be in,
right,
and then select new group form, and then that form will survive the tenure of the employee who created it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's another good example of starting your work in Teams. This area that is by default set for the team to collaborate, kind of like starting in SharePoint. You're starting in places that are designed for the team collaboration. Anywhere else I go is probably meant just for me. If I'm not in Teams or SharePoint, that app is probably thinking about me and probably thinking about my OneDrive. So yeah, that's some interesting behavior to develop. Absolutely. Good stuff. We got like a minute or two if anybody's got another quick question or comment. Awesome. I'll say one more thing just because this came up this past week. Somebody we're using the files area in Teams, and they complained on a call that I don't know why this thing keeps showing old files first. It just seems to default that way for me, just to remind us all that it doesn't have to be that way. We have views in these folders, and that's what I ended up doing for them. I went and edited the current view. Actually, I didn't even do it this hard. I think I changed it newer to older, which then puts this view in edit mode, and then I just saved view as and just resaved right over top. So it was like 2 seconds, and now that view will default. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Apparently they didn't know about views apparently, and so I didn't know if everybody out there knew about them. So good stuff. All right, good things there. And just as Viva asked me, I hope you're feeling very good as well. And we will get back next week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and check out the blog for more content.